He was born as the strongest goblin in the world. Ogre was a goblin who had a unique skill to turn anything he eats into his own ability. As a result, he began to dedicate his life to devouring powerful skills and showing NPCs that he was the top G of this world. The story starts with a pathetic loser who was stabbed by a dangerous stalker woman. Suddenly, the stalker woman activated her unique ability to coat her knife in lightning. As a result, Tomokui felt himself losing consciousness and was sure that he had died. The next moment, he woke up briefly and wondered why he wasn't dead. He saw an ugly green monster in front of him that was feeding him with worms. Afterwards, he fell asleep again, and the next day he found himself surrounded by many green ugly babies. He realized that after his death he was reincarnated as an ugly goblin. On the third day, Goburo learned that goblins grow up very fast. He then looked at the cave where he lived and tested his skills as a goblin. After he had explored the cave, the goblins received their last meal and learned that they were now responsible for their own food procurement. A few moments later, Goburo walked out of the cave and looked around. He realized that in this world there existed creepy-looking monsters and plants that he had never seen before. Gobkichi, the largest of the born goblins, followed him, and he was excited to leave the cave. Goburo introduced himself to him and decided to form a team with Gobkichi. Next, they entered the forest, and they discovered a one-horned rabbit. Gobkichi started chasing the rabbit and chased it towards Goburo. At the right moment, Goburo jumped from a tree and killed their prey. Gobkichi planned to eat the rabbit, but Goburo stopped him and beat up his teammate. He was a menace and showed Gobkichi that he was the top G of their team. A few hours later, Gobkichi woke up again, and Goburo shared the rabbit meat with his buddy. The next day, Goburo used the same strategy to kill a horned rabbit, but this time he used his new weapon. His plan was brilliant, and he realized that he heard a strange voice in his head. During lunch, he realized that he still had his unique skill called absorption. He was sure that his skill made him the strongest goblin in this world, and he could already feel how his aura became plus 10,000. Afterwards, he tested his newly learned ability, and he was cooking. Gobkichi was impressed by his friend, and Goburo couldn't wait to devour stronger monsters. On the sixth day, Gobmi learned that Goburo was capable of hunting horned rabbits. She immediately fell in love with Goburo, and she began to admire him. So Goburo decided to invite her to go hunting with his team tomorrow. Unfortunately, it rained the next day, and he postponed the hunt to another day. He looked around the cave, and he discovered a group of kidnapped human women in the storage. Goburo was shocked by this discovery, and tried to distract himself by making weapons. Suddenly Gobji the goblin who had raised him appeared. He learned about the level system of this world from his grandfather, and Goburo realized that Gobji always gave the goblins lame names. Besides, he learned that his grandpa was already at level 86. Following this, Gobji explained that a goblin can reach a new form at level 100 and evolve like a Pokemon. Goburo was surprised by this and wondered if he was evolving into a Pikachu. The next day we see Goburo hunting again, and he fought the monsters in close combat with Gobkichi, while Gobmi fought as their backup. They were cooking, and Goburo managed to catch a lot of new monsters. Then they began to eat the monsters, and Gobmi was happy that she didn't have to eat Indian food anymore. Gobkichi didn't understand what she had against Indian food because he loves Indian food. Meanwhile, Goburo realized that by devouring a snake's head, he learned the ability to use poison. He was happy about it and planned to get more powerful skills. In the following days, Goburo planned to test their new gear with his team, and they went into a cave. Suddenly, they were chased by bats, which were most likely the reincarnation of Batman. Goburo stood behind his buddy and started a counterattack. He used his evil eye against them and managed to become the Batman Slayer. A few moments later, he ate the bat's flesh, and he learned other skills, such as echolocation. Suddenly we see some goblins who had been watching Goburo's group by eating the bats. The following night the goblins gathered around Goburo. He had activated an ability and was able to prevent the attack of the 6 goblins. He beat up the attackers and accidentally used too much poison on a goblin. Afterwards, he planned to spare the rest, but Gobmi appeared behind him and he learned that she was a menace. On day 13 they discovered an orc that was uglier than Shrek. Gobmi threw a stone at the monster and Gobkichi launched his attack. Unfortunately, he was pushed back, but Gobmi managed to break the orc's hand. Afterwards, Gobkichi stood up and he managed to push the orc to the ground. Suddenly, Top G Goburo ended the fight and he showed the enemy no mercy. Following this, he ate the orc to learn new skills and suggested taking the rest of their prey back to their home. He shared his food with the other goblins, who were very grateful. Then Goburo went to sleep, but during the night he saw a bunch of writing in his head. The reason for this was that he got the chance to evolve. The next morning he discovered that he was not a pre-evolution goblin anymore, and he realized that he became a Charizard goblin. Goburo was surprised about this and noticed that he began to look the way he did before reincarnated in this world. Afterwards, his buddy Gobkichi woke up and he had evolved too. Gobmi was happy that they had evolved and Gobji was shocked that they became so strong, even though they were less than 1 month old. Suddenly, Gobkichi wanted to test his new powers, and he challenged his best friend to a fight. As a result, they went out of the cave and they started fighting each other. Gobkichi tried to overwhelm his best friend with his fists and managed to push Goburo back. Suddenly, Goburo made his move and he managed to defeat Gobkichi with a strong kick. Gobkichi understood that he had lost and he was impressed by Goburo. After the fight ended, Goburo heard monsters nearby and he knew that danger was coming. He knew that Gobmi was hiding behind a tree and asked her to get the crossbow he had built. Then we see wild Pokemon that had appeared on the tall grass. The wolves hunted rabbits and brutally devoured them. Suddenly they discovered Miss Piggy's husband, who was trying to escape from the wild Pokemon because he hadn't received any starter Pokemon from Professor Oak yet. As a result, the orc was eaten, and Goburo took the opportunity to attack. He ordered Gobmi to shoot the pack boss, who was injured and confused after the attack. After the boss was injured, Goburo and Gobkichi attacked the remaining wolves. Goburo and his friend managed to defeat the wolves with ease, and they acted like Chucky the Killer Doll in the fight. In the end, the wolf boss came to his senses and planned to take revenge on Goburo. Goburo prepared for the final battle, but the wolf died and fell to the ground. However, Goburo ate the wolf leader and gained new abilities. Later, he brought the wolves to the other goblins, and he expected them to catch the same amount of prey. Then Goburo planned to teach them how to hunt monsters, and they started to treat him like a god. Goburo said that they don't need to thank him because they are comrades and a family. At that moment, everyone started celebrating him, and he became the goblin leader. He received a lot of love from his comrades, and he planned to become even stronger. On day 17, something terrible happened because all human women drank poison. Goburo understood that the women had killed themselves because they had lost all hope. Goburo buried them, and he planned to stop Gobji next time before he sticks his wiener somewhere. A few weeks later, he trained the other goblins. While doing this, he also ate a lot of new Pokemons and rare dual monsters from Yu-Gi-Oh! Then we see a group of goblins and Goburo planned to kill them. Gobji stopped him and explained to Goburo that they are basically the father of his generation. After the raiders returned, they were greeted by Gobji. Goburo was surprised that the raiders captured some humans. At that moment, Gobji became Muten Roshi and planned to do nasty things with the human women. Goburo planned to stop him and asked for permission to look after them. But the goblins of the older generation were against it, and they planned to teach Goburo a lesson. This is how a fight arose between Gen Z and Gen Alpha. A few moments later, 2 girls from Generation Alpha appeared and tried to settle the dispute. Goburo learned that Hobsato and Hobsi were mages of Generation Alpha. Hobsato suggested that the 2 leaders of the 2 goblin generations should fight each other, and the winner gets to decide what the village is going to do from now on. Following this, Goburo beat up the leader of Gen Alpha, and he proved that he was the goblin's top G. In addition, we learned that Goburo had eaten Spider-Man a few days earlier, and received some spider abilities. After that, he officially became the leader of this village, and his friends were impressed. He brought the human women to the goblin cave and explained to them that the other goblins would not touch them. Also, he promised them that one day he would take them back to a human village. However, Rubelia asked what he wanted in return, and Goburo replied that he only wanted their human knowledge. He then learned that they were part of a traveling business, and the rest of the group were slaughtered by the older goblins. The next day, he visited the human women again and brought them food. He was surprised that they weren't afraid anymore. The reason for this was that Goburo's aura was plus 10,000. Then Goburo learned that humans don't evolve like goblins, but they still learn new skills like in an MMORPG. A few days later we see Goburo, who had started a boot camp, and the other goblins had to do push-ups. Suddenly some older goblins were exhausted, and they tried to rebel against Goburo. Goburo beat them up and they got angry. On the 31st day, Goburo was sparring with his best friend, and the new goblins were impressed by their fight. They fought into the night, and after Goburo went to sleep, he sensed a group of goblins approaching the room where the human women were sleeping. The leader of Gen Alpha planned to rape the human women, but Goburo protected them and prevented the Gen Alpha goblins from attacking. Goburo was angry that the older goblins had disobeyed his orders. So he knocked out the Gen Alpha goblins and apologized to the girls for scaring them. That's when Gobkichi and the goblins of Gen Z appeared. Goburo felt like Pablo Escobar and told Gobkichi to take the guys outside. So the Gen Alpha goblins understood that they couldn't act like a Giga Chad, and their leader died the next morning. In the afternoon, they went to fight a unicorn, and Goburo used his Spider-Man powers. He managed to immobilize the unicorn and attacked with Gobkichi. Following this, he ate the legendary monster, and he planned to make lasagna out of it. In addition, he learned new skills and tested them immediately. In the evening, Goburo was sleeping, but suddenly Rubelia woke him up. He rizzed her up and she snuggled up to him. The next morning he woke up, and he realized that he had also rizzed Gobmi up too. Later they went to train and he learned that Gob had evolved and her aura had increased. Then we see the other goblins, and each group was assigned a commander, except for Hobsy, who was the only mage in their village, so she used her time to read books about Harry Potter to learn more about magic. Next, Goburo went into the forest and he spotted a unicorn. He tested his demise magic called I Beat You Up Boy and slaughtered the monster in front of him. In the evening he returned to the goblin village, but on the way he found traces of blood. At that moment, he remembered that Gobji had told him that deep in the forest there exist extremely strong monsters called crimson bears. However, he was surprised to see a defeated unicorn, even though it had a skin tougher than steel. Following this, a red bear appeared in front of him, and he wasn't as nice as Winnie the Pooh. Goburo realized he couldn't escape and planned to fight against the beast. He then thought of a plan to become a bear slayer and cast a spell as if he were a fairy tale member. So Goburo attacked the bear and started fighting it with all of his power. Meanwhile, Gobmi was worried about Goburo, who had not yet returned. Gob asked her comrades if anyone had seen their leader, but she was told that Goburo was not in the cave. Then we see the Crimson Bear, who managed to deflect Goburo's magical attack by sacrificing his arm. Goburo was shocked by this and dodged the opponent's attacks. He understood that he had to go all out to win. So he jumped on his enemy and tried to kill him with his axe. Unfortunately, his plan failed and he was pushed back by the monster. Goburo didn't give up and used his Spider-Man skills to tie up the monster. But the Crimson Bear identified as a Charizard and attacked with Flamethrower. The Crimson Bear thought he had fried his enemy and planned to go home. But Goburo healed himself and came up with a new plan to defeat his opponent. After he was healed, he activated a water spell and ran towards the monster. Goburo played the Uno reverse card and identified himself as a water-type Pokémon. As a result, the Crimson Bear's flames could not affect him, and he impaled the opponent with his sword. Unfortunately, the bear was stronger than expected, and he threw Goburo against a rock with all his strength. Goburo was seriously injured, and he was shocked that the bear hadn't died. He realized that the blade of his sword was still in the bear's mouth and planned to end the fight. So he ran towards the beast again, and he proved that he is a top G. We then see him do the Undertaker move and his opponent was cooked. However, the bear was exhausted, and Goburo attacked head-on with his axe. He went all out and lost one of his arms. The next day we see Goburo, and he managed to kill the Crimson Bear. The bear's paw was stuck in his stomach, and he ate it immediately. Then he noticed that he was losing consciousness, and he chose to evolve. A few hours later, he woke up and he ate the bear's head. At that moment, he realized that he had evolved. He learned that he became an ogre, and one of his arms looked like an adult toy. Afterwards, he returned to his village, and his comrades were impressed by him. Gobmi was angry at Goburo, and she kicked him. She hurt herself, and Goburo apologized for making her worry. He also explained to his comrades what had happened in the forest. After telling his friends that he had evolved into an ogre, he went to the humans to get new clothes. The girls were frightened, and he cleared up the misunderstanding. Following this, Emery looked at his broken weapon, and she had an idea to make Goburo's axe even stronger. As a result, he praised her and stroked her head. Next he flirted with the twins and he realized that they are wifey material. He rizzed them up too, but Gobmi and Rubelia became jealous. Later he visited their alchemist, and Spinel tried to copy the slurp juice from Fortnite. She told him that she needed the Travis Scott skin to create shield potions. However, Goburo promised to buy her all the skins she needed, and he rizzed her up too. So Broski became the Wizard of Isekai and created a harem with 6 different women. On day 36, Goburo was sparring with his friend, but he almost killed his best friend and some of his comrades. Gobkichi behaved strangely and he walked out of the cave. In the afternoon we see his comrades and they were pursuing their hobby. Next, Goburo planned to create off-white clothes in this world. Then he was worried about his best friend, and Hobsy replied that he shouldn't act like a little girl. On day 37, Gobi showed up and she was carrying an injured carbuncle, so Goburo used his healing powers and took care of her. A few hours later, the rescued carbuncle woke up and she wondered where she was. Returner introduced herself, and Goburo learned that she was being hunted by humans because they are after the gemstone on her head. Suddenly, she asked Goburo for help to chase away the adventurers and told them about a story about a legendary magician named Velvet. Goburo learned that Returner protected her master's treasure, but her core was injured during the adventurers' attack. He then learned that Returner would die soon and she wanted to give the treasure to Goburo. At this moment, he wondered if it was Gold Roger's treasure, the One Piece, and planned to help Returner. However, Goburo and his friends decided to find the treasure on the same day, and he asked his side chick number 3 if she had finished the weapon he asked for. Emery pulled a butter knife out of her bag and handed it to Goburo. Following this, he explained to his side chicks that he has no intention of killing the adventurers, and he is just going to teach them a lesson. A few moments later, they arrived at Velvet's hideout to find the One Piece. While searching for it, he encountered the adventurers who attacked Returner. They looked down on Goburo and thought he was weak. Suddenly, a guy who had activated an invisibility spell tried to attack him, but the enemy's attack failed. Goburo made a statement explaining that they have no right to enter this house. The adventurers became angry and started insulting his mother. Goburo couldn't believe they dared to insult his mother. Then he was attacked again, but he dodged with some Muhammad Ali moves. The enemies did not give up, and did not understand that their opponent was superior. Suddenly, Goburo was hit with a lightning spell. Goburo got angry because he was hit in the face and planned to pay it them back. So he started his counterattack and his friends supported him. He also took out his almighty butter knife and made out of them peanut butter jelly sandwiches. After defeating the adventurers, he ate a magic bag and learned the skill item box. As a result, he was able to make item boxes, and he planned to sell them on his Shopify store. Then he found the legendary magician Velvet, who had died as the Pirate King. However, Returner thanked Goburo for his help and she entrusted him her powerful gemstone. However, Goburo believed that her gem was candy, so he ate it. Meanwhile, Gobkichi tried to cheer up Gobi, who had just lost a friend. She said that everything is fine, so she smiled at him and Gobkichi instantly fell in love with her. Afterwards, Goburo took Velvet's treasure with him, and he realized that it wasn't the One Piece. He was disappointed and burned the corpse of the legendary magician Velvet. Following this, he found a magical prosthetic arm that turned him into a Transformers. His friends were surprised about his new arm, and he could do a lot of naughty things with it. After that, they returned to their village and enjoyed booze that he had found. Next, he brought the new materials to Emery, and she forged him a new weapon. He was happy about it, and not only Goburo got a new weapon but also his comrades. In the afternoon, they fought monsters and tested their new weapons. On day 40, Goburo realized that some low-level goblins had evolved. Because of this, he came up with the idea of forming a mercenary company. In the following mornings, he went to defeat a golden spider, and he planned to become a golden Spider-Man. Additionally, he discovered a legendary Pokemon and defeated it with ease. Then more days passed, and he found some OnlyFans chicks in the forest. He remembered Gobji telling him that dryads are always horny. Suddenly, a dryad appeared and tried to seduce the Rizmaster. She knew how to use a woman's weapons and seduced Goburo with her thick thighs. At that moment, Broski became a Super Saiyan and he was making a Dragon Ball Z movie. He played with her and his aura was at plus 30,000. As a result, he became her pimp and he got the title OnlyFans Manager. On the way home, he came across a lake, but some lizardmen surrounded him. Goburo used his Isekai Top G skills and killed the monsters. After washing, he was attacked by a bull, so he decided to bring Wagyu beef to his village for dinner. On day 42, 2 goblins evolved, and they were able to use magic. Because of this, they were transferred to Hobbsy's team, and she was excited about it. Next, he learned how to enchant his weapons with magic, and he noticed that one of his girls don't seem happy. Later, Gobmi also glared at him and he asked his friends for advice. They couldn't help him, and he thought that his baby mamas were having their strawberry week. So he went to Spinel and she explained to Goburo that the girls were jealous, because he became the pimp of an OnlyFans girl. He was surprised that the girls were jealous of the dryad, and finally understood why his girls were angry at him. Then he was kissed on his cheek by Spinel, and she planned to riz Goburo up. He was in the mood to play love games with Spinel. Suddenly Gobmi appeared, who couldn't believe that he wanted to make love without her. Then his other side chicks showed up and they wanted to join the party too. He created a private room, and his buddy acted as a bodyguard, while Goburo was enjoying his harem. The next morning, Goburo sensed a group walking towards their village. After he went to greet the intruders, he spotted a group of elves, and they were looking down on him. The elves wanted the goblins to support the war against the humans who entered the forest. They offered food for Goburo's help, but Goburo refused because he couldn't stand the elf's rude attitude. Suddenly they tried to attack Goburo, but he used his conqueror's haki, and the elves fainted. However, Goburo had to teach the elf leader a lesson, and one of his comrades tried to kill Goburo. So Goburo became even more angry, and he took out his holy spear from his item box. He cast a spell, and he showed the elves that he was superior to them. As a result, the elves understood that they had no chance against Goburo, and they decided to retreat. On day 45, Goburo hunted gray slimes in the forest. He collected the cores to get more superhero abilities. After eating 20 slime cores, he was able to make small slime clones of himself. Additionally, he was able to transfer his senses to the clones, so he used them as surveillance cameras. On day 47, the elves had their revenge and Goburo was already waiting for them. He used his roar and caused his enemies to be unable to move. Next, he bound them with his Spider-Man powers, and they were captured by Goburo. Goburo asked the leader of the elves why they came back. The female elves explained to Goburo that they tried to stop their leader, but since their leader was a Gigachad, he ignored his comrade's advice. However, Goburo decided to kill their leader, and the remaining elves had to prove that they are useful. The end result was that only the female elves were useful, and he spared them. They learned that they would live in the Goblin village from now on, and Grandpa Gobji planned to motorboat them. Goburo stopped his grandpa, and warned him that he was not allowed to touch the elves without his permission. So Gobji told his grandson that a man needs to release pressure from time to time. For this reason, Goburo let his grandfather use the elf leader's back door. The next day, we see Gobkichi, who had defeated a grizzly bear. He evolved, and he came back with the appearance of the Red Hulk. Goburo was impressed by his best friend, and he learned that Gobkichi has evolved into a special variant. Then Gobkichi wanted to spar against his best friend to test his new powers. They went out of the cave and started attacking each other with their fists. Gobkichi failed to defeat his best friend. Despite everything, Goburo was happy and had a lot of fun sparring with his best friend. At night, Goburo dreamed and he received a gift from a mysterious person. The next morning, Goburo learned that they had 4 new hobgoblins who had potential to become Harry Potter mages. One of them could become a cleric, and Goburo was surprised about that. Then we see Hobsy, and she had also evolved into an ogre. She was grown into the Lord family as a half-spell lord and got gang tattoos. Next, she wanted to test her new powers, and they went out of the cave. Hobsy's aura was plus 3000, and she became a firebender like Avatar Aang, the last airbender. Later, Hobsy got new equipment, and she had gotten better equipment than Harry Potter. That's when Goburo realized that Gen Z goblins were evolving faster. He also noticed that there were exceptions, and sensed that some of Gen Alpha were becoming jealous. On day 52, some goblins from Gen Alpha planned to leave the Goblin village. They thought Goburo would kill them, but he had no intention of stopping them. Instead, he gave them new gear and wished them good luck. A few moments later, Goburo found a human being killed by an orc. He took advantage of the opportunity and learned the ability Monster Tamer. Following this, he went home and Spinel managed to make booze. He thanked her, and Goburo had a party with his comrades. On day 56, Goburo tested his new invention that allowed him to communicate with his comrades over long distances. Then they went monster hunting and Gobi defeated a triple corn. The monster hadn't died, and Goburo used his taming skill to turn the monster into an ally. A few days later, he had created Pokeballs and caught many shiny Pokemon with them. On day 59, we see Rubelia fighting against a kobold. She was getting stronger and Goburo was proud of her. After training match, he had lunch, and he was surprised that she wasn't useless like Sakura from the anime Naruto. A few moments later, she realized she had learned a new job. They went into the forest and Rubelia hunted down a shiny Tauros. Goburo was surprised that Rubelia had a similar ability to him, as she had to periodically eat monsters to strengthen her abilities. The next morning, Goburo sensed that his village was under attack. He prepared for battle with his commanders and waited for the opponents to arrive. Goburo learned that their enemies were magically animated skeletons and ordered the counterattack. Unfortunately, there were too many skeletons, so he tried to find the person controlling the skeleton army. Then we see Hubsato fighting some skeletons, and she realized that the enemy soldiers are weak. However, Goburo had already located the enemy with his observation haki, and he ordered his comrades to destroy the skeletons with full force. So they started making their move and they were cooking. Goburo didn't hold back and he managed to overwhelm the enemies with his overpowered Isekai skills. He fought his way out and destroyed the leader of the skeleton army. Additionally, he devoured the leader's head and learned new skills. Later, the kobolds apologized, and Goburo learned that they were unintentionally responsible because they dug into a drug lord's hiding place to steal tons of weed for Goburo. Goburo wasn't angry because he knew they were loyal comrades, and he forgave them. On day 61, Goburo went hunting with Gobkichi, and they discovered human soldiers in the forest and decided to follow them. A few moments later, Goburo learned that the humans were planning to kidnap the daughter of the elvish chieftain. He also learned that a betrayer of the elves gave the human soldiers information. After the sun set, the elves emerged, and Goburo was surprised by the beauty of the chieftain's daughter. Suddenly, the humans started making their move and killed the elves. They then tried to kidnap their target, but Goburo showed up and took care of the bandits. The next morning, Goburo had gathered information about the human army and absorbed the soldiers' skills. However, the elf chieftain's daughter woke up, and she thought that Goburo was planning to invite her to a P. Diddy party. He cleared up the misunderstanding and she learned that her guards were all killed. Goburo explained to her that he didn't have to save her, and told her that there was a traitor among them, so the elf girl started crying. The next morning, Goburo accompanied her to the elf village, and he learned that high elves have wings. Then he arrived at the elf village and he felt that the guards were aiming mithril bows at him. The chieftain's daughter cleared up the misunderstanding and said that Goburo had saved her. Next, he met the chief of the village, and he demanded a reward.
Goburo was trippin' and he got an SS rank bow as a reward for saving Daddy Elf's daughter.
Suddenly, Goburo said that he just wanted to test him, and he made a deal with the elves. After this, they became allies, and the chieftain gave Goburo some medicine and fine liquor. The next morning, he realized that Gobmi evolved into a Dhampir variant ogre during the night. She got a new outfit from Fashion Nova, and some guys wanted to lay her. Goburo knew that he had a legendary skill called I Riz everything that identifies as a female, and wasn't worried about someone stealing Gobmi away from him. Later on, he learned that Gobi had also evolved, and she evolved to an half-earth lord. Then we see Hobsato, who had evolved into a half-bloody lord and was able to use blood magic. Goburo noticed that they all had gang tattoos, and he wondered what that meant. Meanwhile, Gobji was proud of his grandchildren and gave them new names. A few days later, Ogre prepared for war against the humans. He produced new AirPods, but the elves had a problem, and he took care of them. Then the boot camp began to make the kobolds and elves stronger. Ogre created skeleton soldiers and told his comrades to fight against them. As a result, they leveled up quickly, and Ogre was happy about it. On day 65, he wondered if he could eat his skeletons, but his plan failed. Then he did the One Punch Man workout with his comrades to become stronger. On day 66, Earthy was asked to dig an apartment for the kobolds.
Next, he planned to catch some wild Pokémons with the kobolds. So they entered the forest and found many Mightyenas in the tall grass. Earthy accompanied them and she tested her new powers, learning that she was as strong as She-Hulk.
In the evening, Emery had forged the axe for a god, and Ogre was impressed by it. Emery was glad that Ogre liked it, and she was rewarded for making him an overpowered weapon. The next day, Ogre Kichi wanted to talk to him, and he told his best friend that he had a crush on Earthy. Ogre planned to help his friend, and explained to him that he should just rent a Lamborghini and take her on a date. So Ogre Kichi followed his friend's advice and he managed to riz her up. The next day, Ogre fought against his buddy, and he found out that his friend wasn't a virgin anymore.
Ogre already heard about his friend's wild night because Dabmi told him about it.
In the afternoon, Ogre went on a double date with his friends and learned many new skills. He was surprised by his new skill and realized that he could become a Marvel hero with his new ability. He planned to change his job, but decided against going to the Marvel universe. The next day, he tested his new Marvel abilities, and he learned to fly. On day 69, Ogre stayed in the cave, and Rubelia wanted to train with him. After training, he visited Emery, and she planned to make an ice-out weapon for Ogre out of mithril. Unfortunately, she had some problems and Ogre helped her. Next, he went to the twins and he taught them how to make potato chips. Finally, he visited Spinel, and she told him that she had made a new magical item.
She gave the magical item to Ogre and wanted to be rewarded by him.
On day 70, a group of elves appeared with a message for Ogre. Ogre immediately used his abilities and transformed some elves' appearance. Afterwards, he learned that the elves were no longer looking for their elite force, and they were talking about war against humans. In addition, Ogre gave the elves an Isekai Apple Watch so that they can communicate with each other. Later, his comrades learned that Ogre Ro was planning to open a mercenary company. He named his company Parabellum, I Beat You Up Boy Company, and his friends thought the name was fire. On day 71, Ogre Ro and his comrades rode on their Pokemon Lamborghini Aventador into the Kudel Wood. Ogre Ro looked forward to his first mercenary mission and planned to become rich with his new business. Following this, they arrived at their destination, and the human army set up a magical barrier to keep monsters away. Ogre Ro surrounded the barrier with his comrades, and he started his move. He managed to destroy the barrier, and Earthy used her earth magic to block the escape routes.
Next, Dobby and Spellsy did their moves and they attacked with powerful spells.
Everything was prepared, and Ogre Ro attacked with a powerful blast. A few moments passed and Ogre Ro was surprised that the enemy army was not yet defeated. The reason for this was a Lady Knight and her team that were able to withstand the enemy attack, so he created more skeleton soldiers and sent them into battle. The enemy leader realized that Ogre Ro was the summoner of the undead army, and they planned to focusing on attacking him instead of the skeletons. Then we see a magician who cleared a path for his comrades. The Lady Knight received a buff and she was cooking. Ogre Ro was surprised, but he activated his cheating skills and stopped her with ease. However, the enemy was pushed back, and Ogre Ro received no damage from the enemy attack. The Lady Knight wasn't about to give up and wanted to prove that women are strong. Ogre Ro was a feminist and planned to catch her and her friends alive. In the meantime, his friends were taking care of the others and they were cooking. Dobby used her evil eyes and ordered the enemies to kill themselves. Then we see Hubsato and Earthy, who also used their skills and wiped out almost all enemies within a short time. Meanwhile, Ogre Ro was playing with the Lady Knight and he deliberately allowed himself to be hit with a strong attack. She tried to distract him while her comrade cast a level 5 spell. Suddenly the magician attacked with his Thunder Dragon spell, and Ogre Ro understood that the Lady Knight wanted to sacrifice herself. Ogre Ro decided to protect her, and he decided to keep her safe. At the moment he got hit by the spell, Ogre Ro activated several shield spells to survive the enemy's attack. Spellsato was impressed by their leader, and Ogre Ro's team won the battle. After the fight was over, he captured the Lady Knight and acquired new skills.
A few days later, Daddy Elf visited the Goblin village and he was very happy about the victory.
He thanked Ogre Ro and they brought delicious booze. Afterwards he looked at the captured human women and he understood that the horny potion worked.
The two girls were in the Ice Spice mood, so they did what OnlyFans chicks always do. However, the girls joined Ogre Ro's team and he gathered some new information about the humans' main force.
He reported the new information to Daddy Elf and explained his next plan. On day 73, Ogre Ro had set up traps to defeat the humans' main force. Then the enemy army appeared, and Ogre Ro and his comrades waited for the right time to launch their ambush. A few moments later, Ogre Ro gave the signal to start the attack, and everything went according to his plan. In just a short time, Dobby and a few hobgoblins had wiped out most of the army. The remaining soldiers were shocked, and the troop leader ordered his comrades to build a wall. Ogre Ro was surprised about their strategy, and he ordered his friends to continue attacking. The enemies withstood the attack from Ogre Ro's team, but Ogre Ro planned to make the next move. So he ordered Ogre Kichi to take the enemy commander hostage. A few moments we see Ogre Kichi attacking the enemy commander with his axe. The opponent was pushed back, but he had fun fighting against a strong opponent. Ogre Kichi was having fun too, and he smiled while fighting the enemy. Meanwhile, Ogre Ro realized that the enemy commander was useful and planned to make him his comrade. After they captured the commander, they defeated the remaining soldiers and headed home. When they arrived home, Dobby wanted some time with her lover, and Ogre Ro played with her. On day 74, two soldiers complained about their shame at being captured by a black ogre. The red hair guy said that they should calm down, and that the black ogre had always treated them well so far. Afterwards, Ogre Ro learned from the guy why the humans attacked the elves. They heard about the legendary sports drink Prime that could cure all diseases in the world. The humans found out about the secret sports drink and attacked for that reason. Then Ogre Ro made an offer to the red-haired human.
Meanwhile, Earthy was digging a hole and she did a mistake, so hot water was spraying out of the wall.
Ogre Kichi and Dobby thought that enemies had appeared, but it turned out that they had found a hot spring. At that moment, Ogre Ro had a great idea, and he wanted to build a wellness resort in their village. A few hours later, his project was completed and they bathed in the hot spring. Everyone had a lot of fun, and they enjoyed the spa day. The next morning, Ogre Ro got a great idea, and he used his prisoners as sparring partners for his comrades. He conducted a practice war in his cave, and divided his commanders into different teams. Ogre Ro learned that Dabmi and Spelsado are very capable leaders.
But Bloodsado and Ogre Kichi still had a lot to learn because they were stupid as the Twitch streamer Neon.
Then we see the red-haired guy who had defeated many strong skeleton soldiers. Next, Ogre Ro was challenged to a fight and he liked the red-hair human's attitude. So he was healed by Ogre Ro, and he prepared to fight against him. Suddenly the guy, who looked like Shanks, ordered from Wish attacked, and Ogre Ro dodged the attacks with ease. He countered with his Mike Tyson punches and managed to overwhelm his opponent. Finally, he stomped his opponent into the ground and won the fight. After the fight was over, Ogre Ro healed him again, and Ogre Kichi wanted to fight the red-haired guy too. Their new friend was impressive, and he was a worthy opponent for Ogre Kichi. At lunch, Ogre Ro learned that the red-haired human had grown up in a village of demi-humans. He liked Ogre Ro's village because many different races lived together peacefully. So he asked Ogre Ro if he can join his kingdom and become his servant. Ogre Ro was glad to hear that the guy wanted to join his team, and he freed him from the collar. Besides, Rubelia learned that the red-haired knight would be her new teacher. On day 77, Ogre Ro bought some prisoners to Daddy Elf, and he allowed his friend to decide about their future. Then he learned the reason why the chieftain of the elves had shared the elves' secret sports drink with the goblins. Next, he drank the secret sports drink Prime, and he learned powerful healing skills. He immediately tested it on an injured person and was shocked by it. His new skills was able to heal injuries instantly, and Ogre Ro's blood could even cure cancer. On day 78, Ogre Ro was ready for the third battle against the humans. Ogre Ro spotted the enemy commander and threw his spear at him. The soldiers were confused, and they didn't know that Ogre Ro's attack was not over yet. Suddenly, an infinite number of spears appeared out of the ground and they were wiped out. His commanders then took care of the rest of the army and ended the war within 20 minutes. Ogre Ro got the aura of a war god, and he absorbed the soldiers with his slime abilities. The next day, Ogre Ro visited Daddy Elf, and he brought 2 of his girls with him. They were nervous, and noticed that the elves had been glaring at them because they were humans. A few moments later, Daddy Elf brought some good stuff to hit the Za with Ogre Ro. Following this, they discussed their next step to end the war against the humans. In the evening, Ogre Ro returned to his village, and Teresa asked Ogre Ro for permission to cure the princess of this kingdom of her illness. Ogre Ro was aware that solving this problem could lead to many religious problems because he was the new Jesus of this world. On day 83, the final battle began, and Ogre Ro scouted out his enemies. A few days earlier, he learned that the Rugold Orden would take part in the war. In addition, he learned that the Rugold Orden consists of 8 warriors who have received blessings from God. At that moment, Ogre Ro was excited to meet them, and he planned to absorb the powers of humanity's strongest heroes. Back in the present, Ogre Ro prepared for the final battle and summoned his undead army. He planned to take of the main force, so he told his commanders to take care of the rest of the army. Then Ogre Ro made his move, and he sent his undead army into the battlefield. The human soldiers were shocked by this, and tried to defend themselves. They were confident of defeating the undead army, but Ogre Ro had coated his skeletons in slime clones, so they felt invincible, and the enemy army was overwhelmed. A few moments passed, and Ogre Ro gained the upper hand in this battle. He looked down at his opponents and activated one of his top G skills. The enemies still refused to give up and rushed towards him as he prepared a powerful spell. At the same time, we see hero Filippo complaining because he would rather play Fortnite than fight weaklings in the forest. Next, he arrived at the battlefield, and he sensed a person with plus 20,000 aura. Ogre Ro absorbed water and blood, and wiped out the enemies with a crazy spell. The soldiers were shocked by this, and had no chance against the Black Ogre. Then Ogre Ro ate a snack, and Filippo showed up to greet him. Ogre Ro sensed that the zesty-looking guy was strong, and suspected that he was the famous Bonebug Brave, Filippo. Filippo said he was into guys and planned to force Ogre Ro to pick up the soap. Ogre Ro was into girls, and he understood that Filippo might have a drug problem. Suddenly, Filippo waved a weird-looking toy around, intending to beat up Ogre Ro with it. At that moment, Ogre Ro felt that the enemy's magic power was increasing enormously, and he had to be careful. Afterwards, Filippo said that he is also called Hentai King. Next, he used his weird powers to turn dead soldiers into zombies. Ogre Ro was surprised at his enemy's abilities. However, Ogre Ro said that he will never pick up the soap, and Filippo became angry. He replied that he was from Australia and turned the zombies into giant insects. Ogre Ro hated Australia, and his nightmare of being attacked by giant insects became a reality. Filippo thought that Ogre was eaten by his pets, but he underestimated his enemy. So Ogre freed himself and easily defeated the insects. Filippo had a lot of fun, and he started waving his weird-looking toy around again. Next, he used his eggplant-looking wand to order his insects to continue the series of attacks. Ogre dodged the attacks with ease, and Filippo cast a powerful spell. However, he summoned a giant centipede, which planned to eat Ogre like Lay's chips. Ogre was overwhelmed by the giant monster, and his zesty enemy looked down on Ogre. Then Ogre learned that the monster was poisonous, and he lost the strength to hold his weapon. His comrades were worried, and Dami planned to rush to Ogre's aid. Unfortunately, they were surrounded by soldiers and couldn't do anything. Filippo told Ogre that he doesn't have to be ashamed of losing against him. He was a pervert, and planned to turn Ogre into an insect. Suddenly, Filippo realized that his enemy had disappeared. Ogre attacked him, but Filippo used his ballerina moves and managed to get away without any damage. Then Filippo said that he was impressed, and he was still convinced that he was stronger than Ogre. Next, Filippo planned to use a secret technique, and he planned to send his shiny Caterpie into battle. Next, we learned that Filippo was a brokey who couldn't afford a Pokeball like Ash Ketchum for his Pikachu. So Ogre took advantage of the fact that he had caught a Caterpie in a test tube and destroyed the monster. Afterwards, Ogre tried to cut his enemy with his axe, but Filippo had even more tricks up his sleeve. Suddenly, tentacles came out of his body, and Ogre thought he had ended up in a hentai movie. Ogre was disgusted, but at the same time impressed by Filippo's insect skills. Then the second round began, and Ogre had no intention of losing. So he pushed his opponent back with powerful lightning spells. However, Filippo began to use his ability to fly, and he thought that Ogre had no chance of defeating him from the ground. At this moment, Ogre revealed that he can also transform into an insect, and has the ability to fly too. He activated his exoskeleton ability and became a Marvel hero. As a result, Ogre became Exo-Man, and he flew towards Filippo to beat him up. Filippo tried to stop Ogre with his weird tentacles, but he got cooked, and Ogre crushed his enemy to the ground. Then we see Ogre's commanders who had defeated their enemies. Dami got a bad feeling and flew to her boyfriend. Meanwhile, Ogre planned to finish the fight and absorb Filippo's insect abilities, but his enemy decided to run away. After the fight ended, Dami showed up and she was glad that nothing happened to her lover. Later on, Ogre sent a clone into the forest and he visited the next emperor of the humans. He sneaked up like a ninja and told the prince that he wanted to end the war. However, he gave to a lady knight the prime hydration medicine and she was shocked about that. Before Ogre clone left, he showed his true power to warn the humans. As a result, he ended the war, and the royal army withdrew. The next day, Earthy destroyed a mountain to create a defense line. Then Ogre took care of his injured comrades and the captured enemies who had the potential to become his followers. While his friends were preparing everything for the return trip home, next we see Ogre who discovered 2 injured soldiers. The soldiers thought they were going to die, but Ogre had no intention of killing them. So he healed them and let the 2 soldiers go home. Before they left the battlefield behind, Ogre and his friends buried their fallen comrades. Ogre and his friends were very sad, and they wished their fallen comrades to rest in peace. On day 86, Ogre woke up and realized that Hobfu had evolved into a shiny OnlyFans girl who belongs to the streets. Next, he discovered that Hobji had evolved into a half-saint lord. In addition, he had gained interesting abilities and was able to create a protective shield. After that, he was a bit worried about his sister Hobfu, because she had become a ghoul after eating zombies that he had created with dark magic. Then he learned that Hobme had evolved into a Dodomeki. She received the skill observation Haki and was able to foresee danger. Ogre later learned that some other weaker hobgoblins also evolved into ogres. Then he was visiting the kobolds and he couldn't find their leader. Ogre was shocked that their leader had evolved too, and since then he looked like a Japanese man who does cosplay. Furthermore, the goblin leader revealed his true name to Ogre, and he remembered that his grandfather had told him that revealing the true name was danger for the kobolds. In the afternoon, he released the prisoners who had fought on the human side. Before they left, he gave them the choice to stay in his village and join his company. A group of ogres didn't agree to the deal because they wanted the leadership position. So Ogre told them to leave if they have a problem with his decisions. Suddenly, an ogre wanted to fight against the boss to get control of the Mercenary company. They thought that Dami was the boss and made fun of Ogre. However, a fight broke out between the newbies and Ogre. They attacked Ogre with full force, and they were combining wind and fire spells. Ogre proved he was the top G,
and he countered with a regular punch. The ogres that wanted to take over the Parabellum Company were defeated and Hobgoblin healed them. A few moments later, Ogre was attacked from behind by another newbie. He thought he was the new boss, but he was wrong. Ogre punished the guy who sneakily attacked him. Next, he looked for the half-damper ogre, but this guy tried to rizz up his baby mama. Ogre was angry and decided to beat up the guy. Meanwhile, some other races wanted to serve Ogre because Ogre freed them from slavery. A few moments later, the Dampier guy found out he was vegan, and he tried to seduce Ogre. Ogre was shocked by this and decided to beat him up again. After this, they got 50 new members, and Ogre started to train them. Following this, he brought a group of dwarves to his side chick number 3, and Ogre asked Emery to take care of them. After that, he used his free time to create a new Iron Man suit. He also tested some of his new skills and combined 2 skills that were causing him problems. On day 86, he used his new members to test his new ability in combat. Then a few days passed, and the dwarves gave Ogre a warhammer as a gift. They told him that it was supposed to be a sign of their friendship. Then he went into the forest and he had so much riz that he attracted Miss Dryad. On day 88, Ogre decided to become a farmer because he had received magical seeds from Miss Dryad. Then his life as a part-time farmer began, and Rubelia had a lot of fun with it. A few days later, some of their new recruits returned to their homes, and Ogre decided to send the other prisoners home as well. Dami took care of it and used her manipulation skills to delete their memories before sending them home. As a result, they forget anything about the Goblin village, and they became spies for the goblins. Later, he was invited to a banquet by Daddy Elf because he wanted to thank Ogre and his team for their help. Then Ogre asked if inviting other races to the elf village wouldn't cause any problems. Daddy Elf replied that it wasn't a problem because they were friends, and he was grateful to have met him. Following this, they enjoyed the show, and the chieftain's daughter was a priestess who sent the souls of the elves who died in the war to the afterlife. The next day, Earthy had dug up the last of the Spirit Stone. Also, we learned that the Spirit Stone had originally been the legacy of Velvet the Wizard. However, Ogre decided to eat this last batch, as a sign of his gratitude to Velvet. Afterwards, he used his skeletons as Lego pieces and tried to build new monsters. The next day, he had made an exotic car monster, and his girls found out that he planned to take them to a human town. They thought they would be kicked out, but Ogre just wanted to keep his promise. Later, we see Rubelia, and she was sad because she didn't want to leave Ogre. Rubelia's teacher cheered her up, and was sure that Ogre doesn't want to get rid of her. On day 92, Ogre was spending some time with his side chicks. He was happy to have met the girls in this world and was grateful for their knowledge. Following this, he holds a welcome party for the new members of their company. The red-hair ogre got drunk, and he wanted to have a drink with their leader. The following morning, Ogre divided his members into different teams. He decided to assign a commander to each team and explain their respective tasks. Then he planned to set off and he took some newbies with him. They were very nervous and excited to leave the forest for the first time. So Ogre said goodbye to his best friend and asked Earthy to support Ogre Kichi. After this, they left their village and Ogre's journey as a mercenary started. 6 days later, they arrived at their destination, and they planned to enter Tilted Towers. At that moment, the residents of Tilted Towers were scared of him, and thought he tried to kill them. Ogre's ex-merchant friends cleared up the misunderstanding with some V-Bucks, so Ogre's team was allowed to enter Tilted Towers. Then he talked to his girls and said that when they leave this town, they should let him know whether they want to continue living with him or not. At that moment, he remembered the day when they were kidnapped and hoped that they wouldn't leave him. Next, Ogre planned to go to the guild house, and he split up with his team. When he arrived at the guild house, he caused problems because the adventurers were afraid of him. Suddenly an old man appeared and he wanted to help Ogre to become an adventurer. Next, he planned to collect information in the city, and he used his I identify as a human skill to avoid attracting attention. His friends were surprised by this and wondered if he was a transgender. However, he was walking around the town, and he realized that many of the residents thought he was part of the cartel because of his tattoos. Next, we see him attacked by bandits in an alley. He easily defeated them and absorbed their abilities. Besides, he discovered some rings and wondered what that meant. Suddenly, a blonde boy asked some bandits to release his mistress. Ogre listened to the conversation and discovered that the criminal was wearing the same rings as the people from before. Then the blonde boy, who looks like rapper Eminem, said that he will rescue the princess, but his plan failed and he was overwhelmed by the bandits. The criminals planned to send him to the afterlife, but Ogre knocked out the criminals.
Later the boy complained because he was angry that Ogre Row had not killed the bandits. Ogre Row calmed him down and he gave him his business card. Before he left, he transformed back into an ogre and said that he was a mercenary. That evening, Eminem hired Ogre Row, and he learned that the princess had been kidnapped by a dangerous bandit gang.